began a session of the addiction track. After our 3 speakers yesterday, I think Barnett and I are kind of like, how do you follow that? Yeah. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. Questions or comments about the conversations yesterday, or anything that you might want to bring up today as we start? Yes, ma'am. No, you're fine.
I just wanted to share, to say thank you to the speakers from yesterday as well, because you were just talking about healing, and I feel so grateful to have been part of this and to have heard the stories. And I think that it feels like to me that some healing is taking place. And, I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you very much.
I was particularly grateful to you, Kat, because while I have not experienced any of the drug addiction that you have, your issues are very familiar. So, thank you.
Can't hear.
Technical difficulties?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear now, audience?
Testing.
Blueberry.
Okay, they can hear now.
Okay.
That's good.
That's good, Chris.
I'm going to spray that blueberry.
The question came up, I think yesterday, or was mentioned somewhat in passing in this group, about how do you do this? How do you start something like this, or whatever? You know, one of the things that I think makes Gulf Breeze Recovery a really special place is that Barnett has taken the time to see that every person that works there has been trained in the 3 principles. From the therapist, the doctor, the all of the staff, housekeepers, everybody has been trained in the 3 principles, so that they can speak the language that I'm going to keep saying our forever. It doesn't mean that I'm.
It is our. Yeah.
But so that they can speak the same language that the guests speak. So I think that's really, really important to think about the health of the helper. That the people that share this have to kind of have it for themselves first. Because everybody wants to share it, but you got to take care of yourself first. You've got to make sure that you are where you need to be. And then a lot of times the sharing that you do is more what people see than what you say. If that makes any sense. Yes, ma'am.
There's a question about that.
Okay.
So, do you? I have the same problem or circumstance, and I'm wondering, like, do you employ and then train people, and what happens if because not everyone gets hit, and people take longer than others, and so on. So, what happens then if you're training some people and they're like, yeah, well, whatever? Do you sack them, or well, how does that work?
Yeah, they get 3 months to have an insight. Yeah, and those that start in February, their days are even shorter. But no, it's a good question, and I say on the therapist level that we're looking for people who are maybe been burnt out doing things they've been previously doing, not happy with the results they've been seeing of things that they've previously been doing. And then, are you open to just maybe a different way of looking at things. And if the answer is yes, then, you know, we'll give them some books, tell them about some videos, that kind of thing. And, you know, let them look and read on their own, and then let them tell us that that's something maybe that they could, you know, sink their teeth into, whatever you want to call it, you know, to maybe learn more about. And if the answer is yes, and then obviously, you know, they've got a good background, and then we'll hire them on a temporary basis, and, you know, they'll have conversations, you know, right now with Joe Bailey and, you know, some other people, and do some more reading, and then just kind of have them sit in classes just like a guest would do. Because, you know, that's the beauty about this thing. We're trying not to have a hierarchy. Okay, so here we are, we're the experts, and you're the knots, and we're gonna point the way, and show you the light. And it just can't work that way. We're all in it together. You know, I'm constantly learning. Man, I just had a huge insight with Michael Neal just a minute ago about myself. And so, yeah, it's, yeah, we're all learning. And so we have to show that atmosphere. And I don't say we have to show it, but it's just something that it's very helpful when that atmosphere is open like that, you know, horizontally, instead of, you know, having this vertical hierarchy. And so the support staff, you know, they get exposed. And, you know, I've had people that have been there, you know, for a year. And, you know, when we have a training, but eventually it kind of takes hold. We were talking about the book Dear Liza, and I think I'm right, but we had this one support staff. She didn't go to a training, and so we had to have some hours of training, and so told her she needed to read a book, and then I think speak to Debbie about it. I think it was,
Gave her a couple hours.
Yeah.
Continuing education
Yeah.
credit, something like that.
and she read Dear Liza, and something kind of struck with her. Bam. And so you never know. Now,
So I'm hearing you say that basically you're patient people, you know that they'll get it in their own time, but so long as there's that feeling of openness and so on, then they're okay to stay. And I guess they will self-select out as well.
they will usually fire themselves.
Yeah.
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 Which, you know, is okay. I mean, you know, it wasn't for them. You know, it doesn't make them bad or us bad. It's just, you know, what happens. And but yeah, you know, it's so funny because it did take time. But right now, you know, the feeling state of the facility is, you know, because we've got everybody, I say everybody, but majority of people on board, that it really does carry over into the guests. And we'll have them say, when I walked in, you know, I just felt this feeling, you know, I was scared, but I wasn't. And, you know, now some still are, obviously, but we hear more and more of that.
And even the doctor, the medical director at Gulf Breeze, he is someone that had addiction issues himself many years ago. And he will share with the guests when he meets with them about his experience with addiction. And apparently he had ended up in some really pretty bad treatment centers back in the day. And one of the stories that he will share is being in a group session where they were all sitting in a circle, and one at a time they would have to sit in the center and have the rest of the group tell them what a piece of shit they were. And I think he ended up leaving that program And that's why he's so sold on this program. He truly loves the work that he does, and he's great. I mean, I love the doc.
Yeah.
He's just an amazing, amazing person. But then on the other hand, there's a young woman who has been there, I think, from the beginning, maybe.
Yep.
From the beginning, who has had an extremely rough life.
Mm.
She works as a support staff person, working with folks when they're going through the sauna part of the program, which is in the very, very early stages. So she gets them when they're at their worst, usually when they're still not happy to be there. And she has just got this in her heart that, yeah, hearing her talk to people, there's just love and caring. She really cares about people. And her understanding of the three principles, I just saw it constantly growing, and she shares it with her children. And it's just, it's just amazing to see how that happens. It's not just, you're not just training people so that they can do their job better. They're being trained so they can live their life better. And it's so much less conflict and that sort of thing.
She actually would come in my office and when you see people at the worst, and you'd have, maybe someone who's really dominant, and this is stupid, and, I ain't doing this. And she would come in my office, wide-eyed, and, I don't know what to do. And now she's like, puffing out his chest, telling him he's not going to do it, but that's all right. So you just see the growth in her. You see the growth in a lot of the staff. We've got a nurse that in our last training had just a huge insight about what's been going on with her all her life, and they just popped her in the face in the training. And she was always too busy to do things, I had this, that, and the other going on. And then it was just like, after that, she wasn't too busy. And she, and just more, she's always been supportive, but just more part of everything now, and doesn't see us against them, nurses against that or whatever. It's more collaborative, and that's all you have to work on, because there's so many organizations that get innocently that kind of get separated, us against them, and that togetherness. People feel it, they see it, they feel it. When people come in the center, they've got the I'm going to find something wrong with you goggles on. Yeah, well, you told us we need to do this, but look at what you're doing.
What do you mean you're taking my phone away?
Yeah. You've got one.
So as somebody that's been on the outside looking in from the beginning of this program, since when you first found the building, and I've got to see what the two of you have done, and Barnett and Debbie did such a good job at training the first staff, the first people that were hired before the center opened, before the very first guests came in, spending a lot of time just like we've done this weekend, and having guest speakers and pointing to the three principles and creating a feeling and creating that camaraderie and love with the staff. And despite the turnover, when you bring in somebody new and you lead by example, right? And you have that good feeling, that's contagious. And I think that's a lot of how they've done it. I think it's been important that you've involved other people like Joe, other trainers, Lisa, Portuga, just different people from the 3P community that will come in person or virtually, but not just for the guests, right? But for the staff.
Yeah.
It's a very collaborative effort.
When I was still in Tampa Bay, I got to meet this gentleman by the name of Bud Risser, who was over the funding of a program that I worked for. And he has like an oil distribution center or something. He's a pretty wealthy gentleman. But the first time that I walked into his office, it felt different than most offices feel. And at first I didn't realize what it was, but Bud has been having his entire staff trained on the 3 principles for probably 30 years. And when you walk in there, there's just this peaceful feeling in the whole organization. And everybody is just so helpful, and just, it blew me away. My coworker, how many of you watched the movie years ago called The Stepford Wives? She said that's what it felt like walking in there, that this was the Stepford office, that nothing could be this perfect. But when people are at a healthy point, they are calmer, and that starts to spread. And I was joking with Bud about how long his people had been there. He said, they never go away. He said, people just stay forever, or they'll retire and then decide they want to come back and work part-time. And that's the kind of organization that you want. Yeah, if you guys are planning on going out and doing this in some capacity, even if it's a group of volunteers that you're getting together to do something, make sure they are where they need to be before they start working with the people you want them to work with. It's super, super important.
My only selection criteria at the moment, and it feels to me that it's right, now you said what you said, is that they love the man. Like, that's my only selection, and then everything else I feel can be trained, or
Absolutely.
It takes time, yeah, for sure, sometimes. But so long as they love the man, then that's enough, because that wins.
Questions or comments?
I know you guys probably have stuff that you're wanting to talk about, so feel free to devote as much or little time to this as you want, but I would love to hear just some stories of just those little vignettes are always really meaningful to me, of insights that you've witnessed in guests or even staff. I mean, I know there's probably a million of them you can speak about.
There's tons and tons, but the one that comes to mind immediately when you said that, and it's not even a Gulf Breeze story, but it was when we were doing some of the working corrections. I think it was you and I at Tarpon Springs Work Release Center. And there was this gentleman there that he's this big, burly guy. And he's in the work release program, and he's got a job as a chef at one of the restaurants. And his job is to make salads. And he loves his job. He's just so enthused with his job. And he'll talk about how important it is to not just make the salads, but to make the salads pretty, so that when the waiters take them out to people, they're really what somebody wants to eat. So, he'd been going along in the class and doing really well. And then we went in one week, and he was extremely quiet. Okay, yeah, we'll just wait and see what happens. And we went in, I guess, a week later, and he told us that the reason he had been so quiet was that he had found out that the restaurant that he was working was going to close. He was devastated, because in work release, if you don't work, if you can't get a job, you can be sent back to prison. And so he just got so caught up in his thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm losing this job. I've got to have the job. I've got to send money back to my family. If I don't have the job, I'm going back to prison. So he had just got completely caught up in his head, and he couldn't figure out a solution. And he said he wasn't even talking to the co-workers or anything, that he was just trying to stay away from everybody as much as he could. He said one evening he was in the kitchen, and he was just washing dishes. He didn't even want to make salads. He just wanted to wash dishes. So he's doing something that's kind of mindless. And while he's doing that, of course, his mind starts to settle. And the thought came to him, all my customers really like me. All my customers don't eat just at this restaurant. They eat at other restaurants. I bet some of my customers might know of other jobs that are available. And so he had started then talking to his customers and letting them know that he was going to need another job. He found a job that paid even more than the one that he'd had, ended up in a better spot than he had been in. But I thought that was just such a perfect example of how we all, in the moment, innocently get caught up in our thinking. And learning the three principles isn't going to stop you from getting caught up in your thinking. I promise you that.
It's true, it's true.
It's very true. I think most of you know by now that Leona is my daughter.
We look alike, right?
You're right, yeah, you can tell. At least we sound like that. Hillbilly accent comes through regardless. But about 3 years ago, Leona was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. My mind really got caught up in that. I went into the center when I was teaching classes and I told them, I said, guys, if I come in here and I don't seem to be my normal self, if I don't seem as cheerful as I normally do, it has nothing to do with you. I'm doing the best that I can, but my focus is elsewhere right now. And I explained what it was. Because there would be times that I would wake up in the middle of the night and my thoughts would start to attack. And it would be, oh my God, what if she doesn't live? If she doesn't live, do I even want to live? How am I going to get through this? How are we going to do this? And I'd have to say, okay, these are your thoughts. You're driving yourself crazy with your thinking right now. She's doing everything she can for her care. In this moment, everything is okay. So understanding those three principles made that horrible, horrible journey so much easier than it could have been. And then there was icing on the cake, because just as she was finishing up her treatment, she was on the last few chemotherapy treatments, I was diagnosed with uterine cancer. so that thing went on just a little bit longer. But the three principles understanding helps you navigate life. You never know what life's going to throw at you. But it will. It is a contact sport, and there's going to be constantly things happening to you and to people that you love. But having this understanding helps you sail through it a little more gently, a little easier. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry that I haven't been at the previous tracks. I wanted to come to this one. And I've always dreamed of a center where the staff was trained and the guests were trained and so forth. Do you know of any others like yours? Is one part. And also then, have you considered any type of outreach in terms of sharing the power that has been developed there to somehow go beyond the borders of your current program?
I personally don't know of another facility. That's not to say there's not one. Yeah. So this is my first time, coming out and talking, about what we've done and that kind of stuff. And somebody's been pushing me to do that for a while, and I wouldn't listen to her.
So what else is new?
Right.
Done a great job. Amazing. Really good.
Thank you. And so with that is kind of the first steps in trying to break out and do just what you're saying. Yeah, because it's definitely needed. And through a lot of trial and error, we've been able to finally get something that that I feel, well, I know works. And you weren't here the last time, but we had went over the statistics that we have, and they're phenomenal. In fact, I just happen to have them. But in 2016, we had 115 guests. 88 of those communicated with us
After they left the program.
after they left the program. Okay. Out of those 88, 89% reported as doing well. Now, what the definition of that is not relapsed, or those that maybe had relapsed and used once or twice, but got right back in the program. It wasn't any fun to them anymore. And we'd call it a slip. But, it's...
Those type of results have been consistent over the years. Leona is the person that had been following up with our guests, and it was personal phone calls. Of course, they can decide to opt out, and then they wouldn't be counted as the 88 in this group. But those personal phone calls would be to ask, have you had a slip? If you have you been able to stop? And
if not, what can we do to help?
right,
Yeah.
Where
that
can we
part.
point you? Do you want to speak to a pre-principal practitioner? Do you want to come back to GBR for a tune-up? What can we do?
And I think by not, so you have to have policy. It's just part of it. When you have, people that are in a residential setting, if you don't have policy for the guidelines and stuff, then it gets out of control really quick. Because you've got people that have, special circumstances, and everybody's special circumstance makes sense. Okay. But you have to have, some kind of that order, if you will. But like in that case, we're real flexible. And so, if a person is struggling or whatever, we'll actually give them some extra time, with a 3Ps consultant, to try to maybe get back on track, just see where the thinking went awry, because it's usually a relapse in thinking, and then the relapse follows, and see if we can help get it back on track, and so we're real flexible when it comes to that.
You're also real flexible about 8 weeks. Our program is supposed to be 8 weeks long, 8 weeks. But any one of the therapists, and me when I was there, could go to Barnett and say, this person is doing well, but I think they really need maybe another week here to be solid before we send them back out into the world. I was never turned down, and I don't know of any therapist that was ever turned down. And it's without extra charges or any of that kind of stuff.
What I must say to add to that too is they allow the guests to also do that. So, so for me, I was like, I think I got it, but I want another week. And I know the same for Kat. So
I would have never left.
You didn't leave, did you?
Yeah, you didn't.
Well, I left and I came back.
Permanently.
And I'm not far, so it's like I'd keep coming back.
But now I have the option to come and go.
It's getting cool, right?
You get to keep your phone this time.
What's a tune-up?
It's when a person comes back, typically for 30 days, and just basically trying to to help them see where the thinking may have gotten in the way, or whatever, just to get a regrounding, if you will. Okay, because it's really easy to go back out there in the conditioned ways of how you were, just slowly creep in, and just like I said, the relapse in thinking, if you will, and believing your thinking to be true. It's just real subtle. It's like addiction's real subtle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Addiction, it starts off as a solution and a big deal, and then the next thing you know, you're hijacked, and you don't even, and you're like, how did that happen? When did that happen? But it was just so slowly over time, and that's just kind of the way, when we go back into the, our lives or whatever, our conditioning, our previous conditioning kind of takes over. So that's why we always tell people, no matter what, stay in touch, with your 3 Ps, educator, because it happens so slowly you don't even realize it's happening. And those that do that do really well. But, if there's a weakness in anything, it's obviously just like we talked about, we go to 12-step meeting anywhere, and we don't have, 3 principal meetings everywhere. But the strength is that we've got good people that are there to help, and they will help, if the person just reaches out. And, we've seen it time and time again. But, it does take that reaching out part, because the rehab high, and I mentioned that before, it's really easy to leave and, I've got this and but, the conditioning, previous conditioning kind of takes over.
No, it's all me, okay. A couple other things that I'll add is, I've stayed in touch with all of these guests. All of their phones are in the program in my phone. It's personal. I know them. I've visited them. I travel for work. If I'm in Chicago and we've got a graduate, we'll go to lunch. If I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, we'll go to breakfast. Those kind of relationships. The commonality that I've heard, and I've worked in other settings in prisons with people that are in drug diversion programs, in addiction. Debbie and I did a lot of work with OxyContin and opiates back in West Virginia in the 90s. But what I found with GBR that I think is so unique, and we've got 2 grads that could speak to this, people love GBR. They'll say to me, I wish I was having a problem so I could go back. So much. Chris was such a good chef. Really, it's just, there's such and you don't hear that. You don't hear love for rehab.
When are we having a reunion?
All the time.
All the time. And when are we?
No pressure.
And I think that goes back to what they were saying, and it reminded me again, because it's refresher, is just imagine the moment you walk in and people are saying you're a guest and so kind to you, like you guys are talking about. I remember thinking, like, who did drink the Kool-Aid? Why are all these people smiling? Why is everyone happy? Nobody wants to leave. Because that's not what I thought of when it came to recovery. So it's like, it really is a place. It's incredible.
Yes, sir.
I love the great aftercare and follow-up. Have you ever considered, or do you already have any kind of pre-warm-up? What I'm thinking, for example, is if life tends to brainwash us, what you're doing is brain rinsing. Could you implement a pre-rinse cycle?
That's interesting.
Before they come in?
That's a tough question.
That's an interesting.
Well, I think it would be challenging because I say we too, we have such ownership of GBR, but it's a full detox facility too. So we're getting people that are coming in at the height of their addiction. So I don't know that a pre-rinse would stick very well. These are pretty deep stains, right? I think sauna is the best pre-rinse. They come in and we're putting them through a detox program that's medically covered, with the physicians and nursing staff. So I don't know that they could really hear.
Some of them don't even realize they're going through the rinse cycle yet.
Yeah, some of them.
They, some get leveraged in, by their family, that kind of thing, and real resistant. There's very few that are clicking their heels, that are saying, I give up. Please take me. There are those that do, no doubt about it. But, I'd say the majority, have, I don't like using the word denial, because I think, I know everybody that goes in there knows deep down inside that their life's a little out of control and that things, are not like they should be. And so, it's not really the denial by the true sense of the definition of denial, but they're still in that resistance stage. And so, yeah, they're leveraged in, maybe upset with the families or whatever, but on the, in the back of their mind, they know they need to be there. And it just takes a while to get them from that point to a point where they're open to listening and to kind of hearing.
And if I can, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, just one second. I said yesterday that there's a lot of wisdom in AA, the things that they do and say. There's a lot of wisdom there. And I'm certainly not an expert on AA, but I think they say something about that for the first 30 days in a person's recovery that they shouldn't make any major decisions and that kind of thing, that it takes that long roughly for a person's mind to start to clear. And I think there's an awful lot of wisdom in that. And it's intentionally built into the program to go slowly at first. That's why there's not a whole lot. We'll have guests that get upset and say, I've been here for a week and I'm really not, you're not doing anything yet. Did I just waste my money to come here for this? But you have to let that mind clear enough to be able to hear. And so, we try to take all of that into consideration as the program was put together. And then we'll have people that will call in and they're wanting to come in. I can't stay 8 weeks. I've got a life. There's no way I can stay 8 weeks. I'll come in and stay 5 weeks. Will that work? Fine. Yeah. They need to be there at least 8 weeks. We've been at this long enough now to see what works. And what works is giving people a chance for their minds to clear and be able to hear. And once they hear, you've seen the results of what happens when people hear. Yeah. Could either of you done it in 30 days?
No.
Well, and I think too, what I know from my own experience and then what I've seen from other people is that I don't think I've seen anyone, just anecdotally in my experience, that has come in willing to examine what they're doing to themselves with their thinking. Mm-hmm. The drug addiction is almost an opportunity for us to address that. And we sort of sneak it in the back door because you're here for the drugs, not for your thinking. And I think what happens too is that particularly in addiction and alcoholism, people lose so much of their self-respect that they're grasping so tightly to things that they've decided are important about them. That's all just thought. And, if we were to try to reach out to them, this pre-rinse thing, what I'm and I could be terribly wrong, but what I'm envisioning happening is when we get people in the door, what they're usually saying is, well, I'll let you talk to me about this, but you can't have this. Mm-hmm. This is mine. This trauma is mine, or this thinking is mine, or this feeling is mine. You're just here to tell me about drugs. And we say, okay, they're where they're at. And then we very gently, takes about 30 days usually before they're willing to say, okay, maybe this is a participant too. Maybe this thing I'm carrying like baby that you can't have is playing into this in a bigger picture. And I don't think that we could address that even. I think that people would run for the hills if we tried that initially.
And you don't find out the facts like you're saying. I mean, when people come in, we have to do a psychosocial assessment. And the therapist that does the psychosocial assessment, usually that's done in the very early stages. And many, many, many times, people aren't honest with their initial psychosocial assessment because they have not built any rapport with that therapist. They don't have any trust. They don't think that person could understand their problems. So it might be 6 weeks out into the process before the therapist starts to hear about the real issues that person is having other than their addiction. That was a great point, yeah.
I think that's something we've noticed as well with that, like you're talking about, was so many, if there were, and myself included, I remember saying to my parents, like, I'll figure it out and go for like 7 weeks. Because they're just terrified going in. But a lot of those insights, I started hearing anyone start having those insights around week 5. And so that really is important. And I heard that sometimes the people that had to come back had left early. And that's when you had to realize as well that it really is 8 weeks.
It takes 2 or 3 weeks for people to get past the crazy factor. And that is thinking that we're crazy, you know. Because it is different, you know, it's different than what they're used to hearing. And it just takes time.
You mentioned that sometimes that you give people extra time with a 3 principles consultant. What's that? Is that, and what is the criteria for that? And also another question is, do you do traditional psychotherapy? Is that all? It sounds like there might also be therapy in the program as well.
Oh, very much individual therapy, at least once a week with their therapist, most often twice a week with their therapist. It's an intensive program.
And the therapist is 3 principles.
3 principles,
Absolutely.
right? You know, when you say psychotherapy, but yeah, it's a one-on-one, you know, with the licensed therapist, and you have to have that, you know, to have your state license. Mm-hmm. And so you know, therapist is part of that, and you know, you just have to have your therapist. You know, like I'd said before about those that were open to maybe looking at doing things a different way and learning. But yeah, you know, but the therapy sessions are typically pointing them back to themselves, you know.
And then the continuing education program, the transitional care program that we call it, for when they go home, that wasn't part of the original GBR. It was maybe 6 months in, you think? That we
maybe even
that?
further, yeah.
That seeing the need of it, and we're sending these people home and they have no meetings to go to. What are they going to AA? Like, we knew we were missing something, but how do we do this? And then there's lots of logistics that you can't have counseling across state lines. This can't be therapy. Like, there's so many things that interplay, and we have, like she said, we've got people from around the world that come to GBR. And that's not what we want anyway. We want to continue to point people back to their health. This needs to be 3P based, not psychotherapy. So we worked with Joe Bailey and came up with what I call our dream team. And it's people that are grounded in the 3 principles first, but people that have worked with people with substance abuse second. That was our 2 top criteria. So Lisa Fortunga is an example. She's done this work for years. Joe Bailey, he's on our dream team. I did it briefly. I just don't have time with all of my other responsibilities, but it started as just 2 hours that could be broke up. Now it's created 4 hours. And then we're like, well, hang on, maybe the guests need an opportunity to communicate with each other. Let's create a Facebook page. Mm-hmm. We'll disclaimer it that we can't guarantee your privacy on social media. You know, we'll kind of hide the name. It's not Gulf Breeze Recovery, you know, but if you want to sign up for this, you can stay in touch with other guests. All of us as faculty are on there. We will kind of screen the posts to make sure that it's pleasant things, that if somebody's in a really low mood and they've put something that may not be the best, let's take it off the page, but reach out to them. Do you need something? Can we talk one-on-one? You know, so we've tried to really create a loving environment once they go home to continue what they're learning at GBR. But that changes too, and even surveys. We do surveys, and the surveys are not Survey Monkey. It's with somebody asking questions. I did it for 3 years, and it was by design because I wasn't there. So I'm remote. I'm off campus. Be as honest with me as you want. Your answers are never going to go to them. It's never going to be, well, Colin said. It's going to be buried 10 people at a time. But we look critically at that and have made significant changes to the program based on what we've heard from the guests. But no, guys, you're doing this wrong. Okay, well, let's learn from it. What can we do better?
You know, you might get, if you get one complaint about something, it could be, you know, just an individual. But if you hear something consistently, then it's time to look into how you can change it and make it better. But yeah, it's just an amazing thing to be a part of. It's been one of the greatest things of my career to be a part of Gulf Breeze Recovery.
And it's its own community.
It totally is. And the thing that most of you that have had experience in the 3 principles at all have learned about separate realities. Mm-hmm. And how easy it is for one person to see one thing and one person to see another. That really comes into play there, and you have to be aware of that. that when you're talking with somebody, especially when they first come in, they are afraid. They may have had a horrible experience at another treatment center. They're going to not trust and they expect maybe to be treated bad, like the experience that our doc had had. So you know what that's about, and you can't be as reactive. You have to sometimes take a little bit of abuse in the early, sometimes a whole lot of abuse.
I tell you, the one thing I've learned, and you know, I'm still learning, but, and you know, I've slipped, but you know, is that low mood state thing that we keep talking about, and not reacting when you're in a low mood state, and so, you know, when somebody comes and they attack the baby, you know, which is the facility, you know, the heart starts pumping and the blood starts rushing and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, a lot of times I just have to tell them, so, you know, let me get back with you on it. And I may stew on it for a day or two, but always address it, you know, once that's passed. Because I have addressed it in that heat of the moment, and I don't know, it just never has worked out.
That was very seldom, I have to say, very, very seldom.
Yeah, but it has happened, and then having to go back and, you know, maybe apologizing. But even that apology and talking about, you know, how I reacted in a low mood state was a learning experience for the guest and for myself. So yeah, it's everybody, you know, is doing the best they can with what, you know, their level of awareness is, you know, at that moment, including ourselves. And you know, that's and that helps. That thought pattern kind of helps, you know, with that horizontal thing that, you know, I was referring to.
What Leona is passing out is probably one of my favorite separate reality little cartoons. And that's kind of what it is when you're dealing with folks in this setting too. How many of you have ever been the mom in this? How many of you have ever been Dennis? We all have. We've all been where we're just not communicating, where, you know, Dennis, he's not being difficult, he's just being himself. But the other person sees it as somebody being difficult. But when you start to see that even when they're being difficult, there's help underneath that. And I'm typically a very calm, easygoing person. And in many sessions, Barnett and I would turn into the principal and co-principal in little disciplinary things that would come up. And it shocked me very much to see that Barnett was the one that was able to stay much calmer than I would. I'd be irritated with people and ready to tell them about it, and he's just so, well, have you ever thought about it this way? He's been so great at that. Yes, I'm sorry, Mark, I think you wanted a question a minute ago and I missed you, sorry.
It's kind of a comment and a question, but because Brian brought up the idea of pre-rinse, so it just got my juices going, you know? Because it's like, how far back do you want to go? I mean, and it's like funny when something like this gets created, it's like, you could, I wish I had like 10 lifetimes to put my energy to the different projects that could come up just from one like successful thing, you know, like this. So like pre-rinse, I mean, how early do you want to reach somebody before, you know, like early while they're starting to dabble, when they're in school? You know, the other big thing that I'm thinking of is the parents, or the families of you know, sons and daughters who are struggling but are not ready yet. They need a whole support and, you know, learning the 3 Ps and what, you know, how they can be okay even though their sons and daughters are not. You know, I mean, Joe was a, you know, great example of, you know, how long it took for, and she had been, you know, trying to tell her son about the 3 Ps for
Right.
years. And
Right.
but if she had maybe other resources, you know, who knows? I mean, you know, it's an individual story, but just to have that more out there. So it's just, I guess, you know, what are some of your thoughts about how to expand backwards? I mean, obviously you're talking about expanding after, but like going backwards to, I guess it's the prevention field.
You mind?
No, go ahead.
It's funny you asked that. So I'm trying to, Brent, the comedian, from Russell Brand, yeah. So we saw a little clip, and he was on Bill Maher, yeah. And he was talking about addiction and his, you know, account of it. And he started talking about consumerism. And he went kind of on this rage a little bit about it. And it was so funny because it just kind of, bam, you know, way back, well, I say way back, but around 09, 08, I had written a paper on consumerism and addiction. And so I said, you know, I went back and I read it. And then actually we did the press release on it. And yeah, you know, now I had said it before about how we're brought up as little children believing that, you know, this plastic toy is going to create happiness for us and fun and excitement. And the problem is that a lot of times it does for the first week or two or month or whatever, you know. I don't say happiness, but, you know, fun, whatever. And so we grow up and, you know, that outside in thing, and then, you know, we turn to drugs and alcohol. And, you know, there's been a lot of political economists that talk about consumerism and the emptiness that it leaves in people, you know, and it was so funny because I kind of equated it with Viktor Frankl and the existential vacuum that he talks about, okay, in man's search for meaning. And one of the things that he said was that you cannot understand depression, aggression, or addiction unless you understand the existential vacuum that lies beneath it all. And I'm like, you know, so yeah, how do you pre-rinse? And I believe that it's in the school system, in the education system, about teaching people, number one, how they're being hijacked. But then number two, you know, with kids is how, you know, what really creates my happiness? You know, where is this coming from? You know, because kids are searching for it, right? There's, whether it be relationships, things. Look how lucky this guy is. He gets to drive around in a, you know, a Corvette. God, I wish I was like him. Man, I bet he's the happiest guy on earth. He's probably one of the most miserable guys at school. You don't know.
He's looking at the guy in the Mercedes.
Yeah, he tells the guy with Mercedes. But yeah, and so it's to address the systemic problem. You know, it is, in my opinion, that pre-rinse thing, yeah, that I didn't really catch on until you mentioned it. But yeah, just going out and educating people so that, you know, we don't have our next whatever crisis. You know, right now we're in the opioid crisis. But you notice how it always shifts from one drug to another? We used to be in a crack cocaine crisis, Now we're in an opioid crisis. It's easier and cheaper. Whatever's easiest and cheapest to get, we kind of float around.
The consumerism piece just reminds me of how, long before I heard about the three principles, I realized for myself that we're so prone to comparing everyone else's outside with our inside. And we don't know what anyone else's inside is. Really.
Exactly.
But they can have all the things in the world and still be in that existential vacuum.
Right.
And we somehow look at their things and think, oh, they're so much better off than I am, and I have nothing. And, woe is me.
Yeah.
It's funny. I look at, I'm dating myself. I look at Elvis Presley.
Wow.
I am. I know it. But this guy had everything. The looks, the money, you name it. And this guy was miserable as he could be.
There's a little cartoon illustration, I can't even remember where I saw it, of like a guy in a really nice car, and there's a bus going by, and the guy in the bus is going, man, I wish I had that car. And there's a guy on a bicycle riding by and said, man, I wish I could afford a bus ticket. And there's a gentleman walking, and he said, God, I wish I had a bike. And then the last frame goes back to the guy in a really nice car with his wheelchair in the back, saying, man, I wish I could walk. And I actually had this insight a couple weeks ago where as I'm going, man, I wish I could, and I'm thinking of all the things that would make me feel okay, I'm playing it through like a movie. And what's missing in the movie is that my experience of it. So what's lacking is fear, insecurity, anxiety, which I know I don't get rid of with things. So why am I playing this movie and thinking that these things are going to bring me this lack of negative feeling? Like, duh. That's inside, duh. You're always like, duh. Why do you think
Love that. Mark, you were asking, when, how early. The program that Mark and I worked together with in Tampa, the Cypress Initiative, when we were there, it was working in corrections almost exclusively. And it was wonderful work. We saw great results. But I met with a warden who was over, I think, 4 of the programs that we were doing. And the warden told me that in the work release centers where we were, that the programs were getting the desired results. There was less violence. The guards were under less stress because the guys were behaving better. More of his people were going to work than ever had before. Every result he had wanted to get, he was getting. And if we could keep those programs running in the system for another 5 years, he might be able to get us some funding. Because we were doing the programs for free, and if we could do them another 5 years, he might get us some funding. So at that point in time, the board members of Cypress Initiative decided that they wanted to back out of the correctional program. I mean, who can blame them? It broke my heart because I really loved the work that was going on. But they ended up turning their dollars toward education, and that's what Cypress is doing almost exclusively now. And I can be a little more objective now that I'm back from it a little bit, because I think that probably is a better way to spend the money. Then, maybe they will prevent some of those kids from having to ever experience prison. And yes, sir.
Yeah, I heard of us talking this morning that they had a study that was done on 3 of the different schools they were in. One of them was a Christian private school. Another one was a school with the most difficult kids in the district, the ones that got kicked out of all the other schools because of a wide variety of reasons. And so they had a broad gamut of the schools that they were in and teaching. And when they completed the research study, there was 3 significant things that was true for all the schools. And I don't remember what the 2 of them was. One of them was that the students were less likely to use drugs. That is fantastic. I love that. That is great. Did you have something? This is so natural for kids.
With adults, this is sometimes hard for adults to take, because when somebody stands in front of you and starts telling you about something different, and especially something like this that sounds a little woo-woo, and it does, I mean, honestly, this stuff sounds a little woo-woo when you hear it the first time. What an adult is doing is they're weighing it out in their head. Okay, how does this fit into what I already believe? Okay, if I have this belief about this, or what they are saying, is that going completely against that? If so, I don't want to hear it. Kids don't learn that way. Kids are like sponges. It doesn't matter what's coming at them. They're absorbing it. They're taking it in. You know, when they're little tiny, they learn the bad words right along with the good ones. You know, it doesn't matter to them. This stuff sounds natural to them. And are we close to time? Oh, okay.
25 minutes.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe I was running this over. But I have a little niece, and it was when she was about 4 years old, Leona had sent her a copy of the book, What is a Thought? A Thought is a Lot. That's by Jack Pransky and Amy something. Thank you.
Something else.
So anyway, they had written this book for little kids, and Leona had sent it to her, and then her mom said that she seemed to really like the book. She didn't know how much she was getting out of it. You know, she's 4 years old, but she liked the book and was dragging it around with her. And about a week later then, Mom called and said that she was getting ready to give Gracie a bath. And one of the things that Gracie was afraid of, you know how kids will have these different things that they're scared of. One of the things that Gracie was afraid of was the shower curtain, for whatever reason. So she said she's getting ready to put her in the bathtub, and Gracie looks up at her and said, you know, Mom, I don't have to be afraid of that shower curtain anymore. That's just my thinking. I said, why in the hell didn't I learn that when I was 4 years old?
Amen.
So that's the pre-rinse, folks. That's the
But the pre-rinse is also in everything that we're doing, because obviously I've got to stick up for corrections, but
Oh, yeah.
the work that I'm doing with the men is not just working with the men, it's working with their families.
Yeah.
Because the men then, they're more present with their children when they come to visit. The families are seeing the ripple effect of how they're being, and they're responding to that. And as you say, because children just naturally are like that, they're starting to realise it's a different way.
And you'd mentioned too that you're doing the follow-up thing for your gentleman, and we never were able to get that going either. So I think it's needed both ways.
Yeah.
I really do. I wasn't trying to say that it shouldn't be in corrections, because I love that and I saw the impact that it had. But if we could start earlier, we could work ourselves out of the other job eventually.
For
Yeah.
Questions, comments, guys?
A little bit of a thought. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, there's a lot of talk about like you said, the premiums, I like that. That was one of the first things John said. He said Gulf Breeze was wonderful, but it's all wrong. It needs to be for the people that don't need it. You know what I mean? Like start early. Like he said, had I had this earlier, of course I
I think we all had that thought.
If you had a good teacher earlier, Joe.
But I think how hard you and I worked to reach kids and to reach state systems and to reach government and all those things, and we were successful. But when that regime changes, it all goes away. But I think what I saw here this weekend, in that we're in Charlottesville, and we had a large contingent, if you will, of local Charlottesville people who had no concept, no previous ideas, you know, just another word of mouth recommendation from sister, mother, whomever. And I think that exponential number may be happening more than we realize. And I think things like this, reaching out to the families, including families in corrections, in recovery, in education, you know what I mean? I think it's kind of happening. I didn't think we'd live to see it, but I think we are.
Thoughts, one of the thoughts that stimulated something I might have mentioned earlier, that Virgil Wood, who's a former colleague of Martin Luther King Jr., 87 now, lives in Houston. He's a real fan of the three principles.
Really?
Yes, was introduced to them by Bill Pettit, and he's met he's following various things related to the three principles. Anyway, he's launching this movement, Free the Dream.
What was that?
Free the dream.
Free the dream. Wow.
In commemoration, Dr. King's death will have taken place 50 years ago this next March, or this April, excuse me.
Oh my
So
goodness.
anyway, he's very open to having this movement be closely associated with the three principles, this Free the Dream.
Wow.
And it's revitalizing, the principle that Dr. King stood for, equality, trying to reduce poverty, racial tension, and so forth. So maybe I'll share this with Dr. Wood and Colin. That what if we were to tie Free the Dream with free rinse the whole country?
Mm.
Maybe it's a cause that would be a platform to reach out.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
You were saying something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This, I guess back towards the beginning of the session, we were talking about the atmosphere in which guests would come into something to be treated with, if for a recovery base, it's important to have that atmosphere of a three principle, having everyone on board in that light. And then I was kind of thinking, like, how is that atmosphere taken outside of that door? And I think it's kind of to something yesterday. It was like a little bit different topic, but learning how to take that atmosphere with them rather than going back there to search for it, And I think that it was just something that just kind of came up when I was just thinking about it. Not necessarily there's a conclusion to that thought, but I think with that mindset, or that just kind of that core mindset of thinking of how that person is that atmosphere to other people when they leave. So I was just throwing that out there.
It's funny, we all want to kind of reverse engineer whatever it is, that may have went on. So I would say, like last night, we had we just in a really good feeling state after, we broke the session here. And we went to eat dinner, and it was just a great dinner. We talk about it felt like a family, I think that was just in each one of us, we just, the quality of our state of mind at the time. And to reverse that, and so, to say a week later, we're all in our heads and all that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's do a conference thing, and we'll do the exact same thing. And everybody getting a feeling state. But that's kind of how we're wired in a way, our conditioning or whatever is kind of, try to reverse it. And so, a lot of times, Kat, I think is right. You have to carry it with you, and it's funny because, people will, move in the area, and for different reasons, but some, it is to kind of continue that feeling, and, but it's always with us, right? It's here, it's not there. Yeah.
I think that's also important for those that we plant the seed for. I just speak to those that do keep in contact, those that don't. How it's such a joy. I know that Kat's about too when you hear that somebody maybe had an aha moment after the 8 weeks, or went back to old habits, but then rebalances. That's beautiful too.
Other questions, comments, critiques? agree on, because as they can start to do that with movies, then they can start to do a little more with life too. So, and some of them hate the movies, Barnett and I will joke because there's movies that I really liked that he hated and movies that he liked that I hated. And
I think we were trying to force feed our favorite movies at the beginning, Mine was, I just thought Gandhi. Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
So long.
People hated Gandhi, and I was like, how can you hate Gandhi? Who's Gandhi?
But even with the movies, we would have them every Saturday. We would have whoever was teaching the class to have each person vote on if the movie was a 1 to a 5 star. And if a movie kept getting low ratings, it would be tossed. We wouldn't keep including it. And I think my favorite and Barnett's both got tossed.
We got tossed.
So what was your?
What do they know?
Mine was the Marigold Hotel. I totally love that. And the women would usually like it, but the men would.
I just wanted to add a comment for people who, when you get impacted, we want to share this, we want to get things started and so on, is that ideas come and then they have to wait for the opportunity almost. So as I said to you guys, that when I went to visit Gilmer Recovery 3 years ago when I was on my honeymoon, that's what we do, isn't it?
Go to treatment centers.
And I heard about the movie idea, and I've been wanting to do that ever since with my guys. But it just hasn't worked, or we've watched the movie, it's gone off track, and it just hasn't worked. And now, like 3 years later, now the guys have trained, and they're showing the movies, it's starting to come back round again. So we scrapped it because it just wasn't working. But I knew that at some point, it could work, but there was something about the way I was doing it. And that's just coming back round again now where they're going, why don't we show movies? So sometimes like you have ideas and then you just have to let them sizzle away until the time's right. Or it just takes a little bit of time and you've got a missing piece. So don't be put off if something's not working straight away. Just keep going or let that rest and have another idea and run with that. And it's like the, 3 principles on every street corner that Chris was talking about yesterday. Like that will happen. We're just going to keep trying it, and then one day, it starts to work, and 2 people turn up, and 10 people turn up.
Yes, sir.
I'm just, after being here, I decided I should learn about the Center for Sustainable Change. Thank you. And they have, I can't really speak intelligently to it, but they have an outreach community. A lot of what I was talking about, it looks like that's what they created a structure for that. And it occurred to me that rather than be like a 12-step program in every town, that something just 3 principles that could help communities in a lot of different ways, besides doing things online, because it is nice to be in the same room.
Absolutely.
And that would be, it's not replacing your specific groups, but it would be nice to say, guess what? If you're in Chicago, there's a 3 principles group that meets on Wednesday in a basement of some church or some auditorium.
Right.
Whether we do this, whether I leave here and start a meeting where I'm at in central Massachusetts, or there ends up being thousands of them, I'll probably just do one. And that will be something. And just as we say, let's see how it unfolds. But we don't have to look for, we don't have to mimic or mirror other programs at all.
Well, we're just trying to fill needs as we saw them.
Yeah.
That's kind of how ours.
And we're gonna have one. So, and I know Ned and them have
Yeah.
one or two or a few.
Yes, they do, several, I think.
Yeah, several. So, we got 990 to go.
Got two questions going here. One of them is from our online folks.
On hiring. So I just wanted to say, Chris, that I would check out Center for Sustainable Change. I reached out to them, and I'm now working with them, and they're supporting me in some projects that I'm doing, and it led to other things, and you just don't know. And yeah, they're a great organization to help support you in bringing this to the community, and they will work with you and work with your ideas. So I just want to put a plug.
Absolutely.
Because it's been a great experience for
Yeah,
me.
they're a great organization. You have a question?
When I was doing an internship with the Center for Sustainable Change in Hollister County, they had an amazing three principles program because it was their drug rehabilitation program was, the director was a 3P guy. He found out about, anyways, that he left and they got basically a lot of their programs got shut down, but all of the people in the programs, they themselves started spreading and started doing their own things. And if you go to Hollister County, California, you can go when I was there, you could go every day of the week to a 3P program.
Wow.
And that was, so, and what it was not from a top-down thing, it was individuals, oh, I want to do this, I got this, and they set up their own things. So it really, often the question, and Dijon said the other day, why not me?
Exactly.
And I think that's really, really true. So.
Chris and I was talking about yesterday, there's something called the Listening Post, which was started by someone in England. But basically anyone, anywhere in the world can just go and sit and wear a I'm listening t-shirt, and somebody comes along and listen to them. And I mean, I can't remember how many people she's got now sort of signed up, if you like, but there's people all over the world now with this t-shirt and this teddy bear, I'm listening. And it's so simple. You can just go and sit in a cafe and, you know, have a little placard, I'm listening. People come and say, well, what do you mean? What's this about? And then you're already sharing.
We were talking in a small group, I think, about, or it may have came up in the big one at one point, about how do you make this grow? How do you get this to exponentially get out there? And the thing is that it's already in process. Leona, Joe, and I, Mark, I guess, we're all there when Mr. Banks was still alive and when he was trying to figure out, and the folks around him were trying to figure out, how do we get this out further? And you can still Google and see his letter to Oprah. It was like a little talk that he did that the whole idea was hopeful that he would end up on the Oprah show, that he could share it that way and really reach thousands and thousands of people. But to see where it's at now from where it was at then just blows me away. I mean, it's all over Europe. It's in Australia. It's, you know, I guess just about every state in the union now you can find at least a small group that's there. So it is growing. I can see that. I can see that it's growing. I used to know almost everyone in the three principal community, but there's all these wonderful new faces and new stories, and it's happening. It really is. You're a part of that happening. You're a part of that exponential growth. It's exciting. And I was told to let you guys know that everyone that's come to this event, so hard to not say conference, will have the opportunity to do 3 follow-up sessions for whichever tracks that you chose. So Barnett and I will be the people that will be with you for the one on addiction. And the Center for Sustainable Change will be sending out emails to all of you. They're not sharing your emails with us because of privacy issues, but they will be sending that out to all of you with all of the contact information. How many of you think that you might be interested in participating? Great, great. We look forward to it. We'll have to figure out a schedule that will work and then send it out and see if that's going to work for most of the people. But I think it is a great way to stay in touch, and you know, when you leave here and you're still in that high from the event, maybe some things will bubble up that you'll want to talk about a little more later, or reconnect with each other, or that kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure that I got that in, because I tend to be a little forgetful.
Same here. I sometimes miss my mind, as you used to say. Probably still do.
Probably still do, yeah. So what time is it now? Do we have time for
4 till, 5 till.
Okay, so we've probably got time for maybe one more question. No questions from online today?
They're gone.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I've just been a little curious, a little bit more about what it's like to go through your program, whatever you want to call it. And what I've heard is that there's a detox at the beginning, whatever that is. I'm not a professional, I'm not in this area. And it sounds like there's some individual work maybe with therapists and classes, and I don't really have a good vision. I'm getting a sense of what it's like, but would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Maybe Kat should address it.
I can, but y'all are just up there on the stage.
Well, this is someone who participated in the program, so maybe she can tell you her experience.
Okay.
So the very first thing, which is not always a necessary component, but we talked a little bit about this, I think, in the first session, that there is a physical dependency, and then there's also sort of the addictive thinking, the addiction to thought. So that's the very first thing that gets addressed, because you do have some of the substances, particularly benzodiazepines, alcohol, are incredibly dangerous to detox with without medical help. We do have a medically licensed detoxification wing, and it's even in detox, which most people will look back and they can't remember the content of anything that was said to them in that stage, because they're truly in such physical distress. But even in that initial intake, the nurses, the doctors will tell them, you're not broken, it's okay, there's nothing wrong with you, we're just going to point you back to you. So the principles are even integrated that early. But the 8 weeks that everyone keeps talking about does not even begin until they're medically stable. That is like an add-on to the program. From there, the very first thing that we do is neurofeedback. Do you want to show you a little intro on neurofeedback? Any?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's essentially visual and audio stimulation, music and headphones, pictures on a screen, and it's a form of biofeedback. We can tell in real time how the brain is responding to that stimulation. And there's individual protocols that get developed by a therapist that are created for each individual based on their history and what they're struggling with. And really the effect that it has is to quiet the mind. I don't know if this is like a scientific thing, but my experience with it is it almost simulates meditation. It's with someone who's just so used to firing on all cylinders. It's a way that we can almost hit the reset button when they're not able to. And we're not putting anything in. We're literally just reading what's happening, and then there's just the music and the pictures on the screen. And there is UCLA did a study on neurofeedback in 2005, and those that had 12 or more sessions in conjunction with residential treatment had over a 30% reduction in relapse rates from those that had treatment alone. So the very first thing that we do is 12 sessions in the first week. That also creates a lot of still time between sessions. So you get that, what we've been talking about, that quiet time that people absolutely can't stand, because they've never had to sit alone with themselves and their thinking and their feeling without the distraction of substances or outside influences. And half the time they go, what are we doing here? We came to this place and we're just sitting. We're like, yeah, that's it. That's the stuff. After that first week, they do they go into the physical health recovery portion of the program, which is a combination of things. It's we do some sauna work, which is just quick in the sauna, out of the sauna, a little bit deeper of a detox, and really just a focus on physical health and well-being. It is a holistic program, so we're not just touching on how do I not use drugs. We're pointing them back to their own wellness at every turn. So not just their mental well-being, but how do I take care of myself? There's some moderate exercise involved to focus on healthy eating, getting them sleeping naturally without the use of substances through the night, which most people have not experienced. And it's kind of an up and down process. That's been heard that a lot is, well, this would be great if I could sleep, but that takes time too. And that's, we kind of stretch that out. Through that whole thing, they're joining the group, those that are about to graduate the next day, and those that just got there yesterday in afternoon classes. And the afternoons are sort of a intro to 3 Ps kind of thing. So we're spending the entire morning just getting them acquainted with self, and then we're spending the afternoon getting them acquainted with the principles. And those first 2 phases take about a month. And then we start to see people get a little bit more clarity and a little bit more comfort with self. And then they are in the more intensive principles-based courses in the morning as well. And that lasts for the remainder of their time. So and then on the weekends, we do fun stuff. So we actually get them away from the facility and do things like we hike to the lighthouse, we play putt-putt golf. When it's raining, we choose a movie and go to the movies. We go see the Naval Aviation Museum, the Gulf area, and just things to be and to experience what fun is like without the use of substances, what being in life is like when you're not in the bubble of the facility, when you're just doing life with other people and without drugs and alcohol. So that's all sort of mixed in together.
With individual therapy throughout.
With individual therapy throughout.
Right.
Because that's not part of the daily schedule. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, usually 2 sessions a week, really. So they really get the chance to have their content that they're thinking that they're so married to, and bring that into individual sessions and say, this is how I'm different, and this is how I'm special, and this is how this, and they get to do that and feel like their experiences and their feelings are being honored in that way, but then they get to go into the classes and see how their experience are really so universal.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Do you want to add one thing? I think it's pretty cool, the blueprint.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was a really important piece.
Oh, I can. We also do a blueprint for success where they sit with their therapist and look at what life is going to look like for them when they leave. And it's pretty detailed. Who is my support system going to be? Where am I going to be living? What am I going to be doing? Really get a chance to pull all that out with the therapist.
And the blueprints sent on to their 3P continuing educator. Mm-hmm. So that can be built once they leave the program, continue to grow.
Yeah.
So I guess we're running out of time. I'd like to. Pardon me?
Cost. What's the cost?
Cost?
It varies on basically kind of where you lay your head. We've got semi-private rooms and then private rooms that are interior, and then waterfront private rooms.
Really going up.
But the semi-private room is $29,000.
For
And
the full 2 months.
for the whole, yeah.
And that's with the detox.
That includes, that does not include detox. Yeah, detox is separate because not everybody needs detox.
No.
Yeah.
And is that charged separately?
The
Is there a charge?
Yeah. There is a separate charge for detox. It's $3,500 for detox.
But we're also now able to accept certain insurance policies, which is new to us and has really made it more accessible financially.
Yeah, we're only able to take paid. Insurance didn't cover much, but we've been able to get in network with some now and are actually working and have been, we've been audited already by JACO, which I don't know if many are familiar with it, but it's what they call the gold seal. It's like the top certification for hospitals and everything else in the nation. And, given us a few things that we need to correct, if you will. And then once we show that we've corrected that, then we will be JACO certified. And that should come at the end of November. And so with that comes the opportunity to take a whole lot more insurance, because a lot of insurance companies will require that, or if they don't require it, then they have, this, long list, if you will, of requirements that you must fulfill. But if you show you're JACO certified, it's automatic. It's like TRICARE, for instance, which is for the military.
Just so I've got a full picture there, what would a waterfall?
A waterfront room
Private
is,
pay is 37,000.
yeah.
And what would the tune-up be?
The tune-up is,
About half.
yeah,
Less than
yeah. We don't have a lot to come in, so I don't have it.
So the semi-private, it's, I think they're all odd numbers, and so like the semi-private is 29,000 for private pay, and then the refresher program is 15,000.
Yeah.
So it's just basically splitting time.
Are you operating capacity, and is there a waiting list? What's it like if somebody wanted to, and what is it, do you have like certain times that people come in? You can't just, they come in groups, or how does that work?
Yes. And no.
I deserve that.
Yeah. No, it's funny because, we won't have anybody, new coming in, and all of a sudden, bam, and you got this big group that kind of comes in, and so then you have a big group drop out,
Graduate.
graduate, not drop out, yeah.
There's no time that you have to use to start. Actually, when you said that, I instinctively went for my phone. You call the number on the website, it rings to my cell phone, I answer. I talk to you the whole way through the process. And if you say I can't come for 2 weeks, and then the next day it's midnight, and you say I've got to come now, or I won't do it at all, I'll be there to meet you. You can do it at midnight.
Yeah.
We're ready when you're ready.
And so it depends. It really does. I think right now we're at 22, 23.
How many beds?
We have 30 all total. Yeah.
25 residential, 5
Yeah.
detox.
5 the detox can be turned into residential. And so
We've had a waiting list a few times.
we've had a waiting list a few times.
Try to get people in as quickly as possible. When I was working with Joe Byer in West Virginia, people would call us from time to time wanting to get into treatment programs, and West Virginia has very little in the line of treatment programs, and even less that I would say are good treatment programs. But I would have a parent call me, and I would call every place in the state and find waiting list. And then by the time that somebody would come off of a waiting list and there would be a bed available, by then they are back in their addiction and they don't want to go.
Yeah.
So it was so difficult to.
And
time
sadly, it
sensitive.
still is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That way a
20 years
lot-
later, it's still
And that's that little window of clarity that we people can get, that it's a fleeting moment.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm running now. I've got, people to rob and drugs to do. I don't want to go there.
That's why cattle meet you at midnight at the airport.
Yeah.
I'll pick you up from the airport at any time, or if it's someplace I can drive, you just let me know where to be.
They actually drove to Atlanta to pick up one of my family members because the plane connection was not on their fault or the airline's fault, and they actually drove here. So I thought that was one I would turn above and beyond. But again, so that they didn't leave.
Because the truth of the matter is, we have also had people go through the program and go home and die. And it's the most heartbreaking thing of being a part of that program is to have that happen. And Barnett and I have sat together many times, and he would say, what did we miss? Was there anything else we could have done? So we want to do everything we can. We hate phone calls like that.
The neurofeedback addition, the aftercare addition, all that stuff, it was brought in, because, of continuous self-improvement and continuous looking inward, at the mirror. And, and I think it takes that. I mean, you have to continue to prove. You can never, in my opinion, point the finger at the guest and say, well, they weren't ready, that kind of thing. What could we do to help them to see? And I realize we don't own people's experience, and I get that, and I don't internalize it so much in the fact that if we can find something that we could do to improve this thing, then let's do it. And the therapy sessions, we increased the therapy sessions, and in fact, if a person even needs more, they get with their therapist, and if they're in a crisis or whatever. So there's that flexibility, that, and so it's a great quality of care. And so, what's the unfortunate part? It costs a lot of money, and it just does.
It's a really hard balance, isn't it? Because of course we're seeing the same thing. We improved, and then now 2 odd years in, we're seeing actually people need longer. They need more support. They need the aftercare, but that comes with costs. And then the authorities aren't willing to pay that because we're funded by the prison or by the council or whatever, and they're not willing to pay that. It's a really hard balance to try and keep adding and making sure that you're giving them the best quality care that makes it the most likely that they could have an insight to help themselves, and what it takes to be able to offer that. I guess it's a continuous journey.
I thought it was really interesting, seeing the facility as an entity in itself, inside out, using the 3 Ps with the entire facility as a person, as an entity for that atmosphere. That's really interesting.
I know we're running over. Thanks, guys.